New Year, at least in the West, is also often a time where we reflect on how we live, we reflect on our life. As a time to look back, how did we spend our time, how did we spend our days. And as the Buddha often says, the days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? It is a reflection that the Buddha says we should frequently undertake. The days and nights are always passing. How well am I spending my time? So New Year is a good occasion to introspect and check, how am I spending my time? Am I developing? Or am I digressing? Or am I losing my good qualities? And what areas can I develop altogether? In which areas am I doing well? Where am I not doing so well? And there are 5 areas that I have identified where we can check ourselves. Just to take a status quo, where am I? And then maybe see whether one or the other would need some extra degree of cultivation. And not all of these areas are hardcore, only spiritual qualities. It's a combination. Because for you out there in the world, living a life, you will also need different qualities to succeed in your family life, in your private life, in your business endeavors. So a combination of skills and qualities is helpful. Now, one difficulty that sometimes arises is, how do we measure our skill in an area? And in the 19th century, in 1916, one quotient was developed. It's called the IQ, the intelligence quotient, which was a test that was devised in order to find out a person's intelligence. So you solve some puzzles there, and then out comes a number that tells you roughly how well you do in general intelligence. And that test was developed particularly for military purposes, where it was important to identify capable people for military service, highly intelligent people who can solve difficult puzzles on the fly, or literally while flying sometimes even. And when there's some technical issue, coordinating things, and a lot of money is connected with that. So they had a strong incentive to develop these IQ tests and make good use of that. Then also in the business world, it became quite well known and established that some companies will do IQ tests to check their applicants' capabilities in these areas and then find out whether they want to hire them or not. So that's their origin. And I'm not 100% sure to what degree IQ can be practiced or developed. Maybe for some of you, if you can leave some comments on Facebook or YouTube, let me know. I'm not 100% sure whether this is something you can further develop or this is just based on your genetics. But I have heard at some point that you can practice things and your IQ will actually increase. Just not 100% sure the source is reliable or not, but I did hear that one can practice also IQ. However, in order to be really successful in one's private life and business life, only a high IQ alone turned out to be not sufficient. Because a person might be highly intelligent, clever, smart, but very difficult to get along with. Not a team player. And this combination will still prevent a person sometimes from achieving higher stages in his career or to make advancements in private life, because if the personal character or emotional handling is very poor, people don't want to be around that person and will not fare as well as he would just based on his IQ alone. So having identified another area here, and then they started to measure also how can we evaluate that. And one was the emotional quotient, EQ. Not IQ, but the EQ, emotional quotient, which measures personal attributes that enable people to succeed in life, as well as the ability to perceive and control and evaluate one's own, but also other people's emotions. And there are some areas of emotional intelligence, you can say, like self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy, as well as social skills. Maybe just touch briefly on some of those. Self-awareness means emotional awareness, where you're aware of what is going on in your mind. Or in the Buddhist teachings, we would say citta nupassana, contemplation and awareness of one's mental states. Is there greed or not? Aversion or not? Is the mind concentrated? Is there sadness or fear? So this would be emotional awareness of one's own mind, as well as that of others. But also self-confidence, So being able to assert oneself and also to be confident enough to undertake things that one finds worthwhile undertaking. Then in the self-regulation category comes things like self-control. When something bad happens, is the person exploding, quite literally. A more stoic approach, where Stoicism, as some of you might know, is an ancient Greek philosophy which emphasizes very much on self-regulation, not getting irritated or upset about things that are outside of our control. And I think has a lot of overlap with the Buddha's teachings about equanimity, patient endurance. And even when I was young in my youth, I was always quite inspired by these Stoic ideas, so much so that I practiced and I wanted to be very fast. So when any strong emotion would come up in my mind, I was trying not to let that proliferate. And even when I remember sometimes when we walk somewhere and you crash your toe against the table or against the chair, so painful. Instead of even crying out or shouting something, just silent, and try to be silent and show no reaction. So of course you will still feel the pain, but this is how quick the mind can be, and you can train the mind to be so mindful and alert so that even when something happens, you know to hold back, and you quickly evaluate. Do I want to express my emotion? Sometimes yes, it's okay. But sometimes it might not be the right time. Now, hitting a door is not something serious, but it could be a verbal disagreement with somebody. And then it's important that you know whether you would like to react right now or whether you would like to withhold a little bit your judgment or your response. And let yourself calm down first. So it's a quite important and interesting principle that the Stoics emphasize on. And in Buddhism, we also have this with patient endurance, with khanti. Another aspect of self-regulation is adaptability and flexibility, adapting to our environment, to new situations. Not to be stubborn, always doing the same thing. If something changes, we cannot adapt. No, we adjust, we adapt, go with the flow. And that allows us to thrive in any situation. Even for us as monks, I was often in a situation when I was traveling in Thailand or going on Tudong in Sri Lanka. You stay at different monasteries, different places, or even out in the open. Sometimes you end up at a very nice place, beautiful environment, and sometimes it's really dirty and filthy. And being able to adapt and be flexible, not make a big thing out of things, is very helpful, very important to maintain well-being. Also self-motivation. taking initiative to do something, and also a sense of optimism that you can achieve something. So this is also important for doing something, wanting to fulfill one's own goals and aspiration, especially on the spiritual path, on the path towards awakening. You need initiative, but also a sense of, I can do this, I can progress, I can be mindful. Maybe not for 3 hours in one go, but maybe for 2 minutes. It's a starting point. Then maybe if you can do 2 minutes, with some practice, you can probably also do 3 minutes, 5 minutes, half an hour. And gradually, you can expand that further and further. So a sense of optimism that, yes, we can train and practice and develop. And then the last aspect here, or another one, was empathy. Not only understanding our own feelings, but also the feelings and emotions of others. And also communicating that. Being of service to others. Empathy not only in the heart, but also expressed by deeds and words. And then the last aspect of emotional skill is the category of social skills, which include things like communication, conflict management, or leadership skills. Nowadays you hear a lot about leadership skills. Everywhere, every company, they send their people for leadership training. But how about team capability? I think this is just equally important, because if everybody wants to be a leader, who will be led? So we need both. In some environments, in some situations, you might play the leadership role. In others, it's required to follow and to adjust and to let somebody else take the lead. So both is important. Team capability. So this all comes under emotional maturity and emotional quotient, about the EQ. So IQ and EQ are both important. But then, if you want to have a long and happy life, it's also helpful if the body is healthy. So you could also think about a health quotient, an HQ, which health and physical fitness, to some degree, is also supportive for well-being and for our spiritual practice. You could take a test. Nowadays you can go probably to a hospital or a clinic where they assess exactly your level of fitness, your heart condition, your lungs, and so on, strength tests. And then if it turns out that there's some weakness, you might want to compensate that and do some light exercise, cardio, or also for the muscles and sinews and bones. So assessing your own health can be important, and at times to counteract and to exercise will help to also maintain good physical health also until old age. That is the third area. Fourth area, I don't think that exists out in the world, but you can think about an MQ, a morality quotient. Morality quotient. What's that? Well, you can assess your level of virtue. How well am I able to maintain, in your case, the 5 precepts? To abstain from killing, even insects, mosquitoes, ants, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or intoxicants. How fit am I in this area? How able and for how long can I maintain these precepts? And if you see some weakness there, you might try to compensate and try to train yourself to, in future, find ways to maintain them for longer and better, more continuously. So morality, ethical standards are very important in our life, both for ourselves, but also for those with whom we live, who depend on us, and who want to be able to trust us, to trust our word, and to feel safe. So our moral standards, our ethical standards are very helpful in relationships, on the workplace, and everywhere. And lastly, you can think about an SQ. Nothing to do with the military. SQ is the spiritual quotient. You can try to assess what's your level of lobha, dosa, and moha, greed, hatred, and delusion, or their positive counterparts, like non-greed, or generosity, non-hatred, loving-kindness, non-delusion, wisdom. So this would be another area to introspect and see, oh, maybe I have a weakness in one or the other area. Or my spiritual faculties, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, are they highly developed? Or maybe they're a bit lacking, some of them. And then to cultivate those that are not so strongly developed. So I find these 5 areas very important to take a whole picture of how one is doing, and then assess and then emphasize those that are weakly developed and develop them further, and those that are already well developed. One can still continue developing them further, but emphasizing also on those that one naturally maybe has neglected a little bit. So what are the 5 areas? Let us summarize. The first one was IQ, intelligence quotient. Second one was the EQ, emotional quotient. Third one was, what was the third one? HQ, health quotient, physical health. Next one, number 4, MQ, the morality quotient, about virtue. And lastly, the SQ, our spiritual quotient, the level of greed, hatred, and delusion, or their counterparts. So all these factors can and should be developed, and not to be imbalanced, just practicing one out of the 5 and neglecting the others. So a holistic approach is helpful, just like in physical exercise. You don't exercise just one arm or one leg, right? We exercise both sides of the body. Likewise, if you develop all these 5 areas together, the life will become fulfilled and holistic and well balanced. So I would like to encourage to identify which of these areas do you think, for you personally, might be a bit underdeveloped. Maybe it's health, maybe it's your moral standards, maybe you didn't pay much attention to the spiritual side of yourself. And then make a determination to put in regular effort towards its development on a daily basis, maybe just 15-20 minutes. So, which one did you identify as being in need of more training? You will know.